answers, I change the questions.
It's me, Austin!
Who are you to doubt El Dandy? Because this guy's a serious professional.
Brett screwed Brett.
Yeah! Can he do it? Cover! Oh, and a kick out! Unbelievable!
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, yo, Pro Wrestling Podcast listeners, welcome to the show where we don't sing it, we bring it. Help us out and click subscribe to show your support. People, are you sick and tired of dropping $60 to $100 for the latest and greatest wrestling video game? Stop immediately. Go to your Facebook account and go to Wrestler Unstoppable. It is available exclusively for Facebook users where you get to create a wrestler, sign contracts. You can get involved in storylines. Heck, create your own storylines, headline pay-per-views, even build your own corporation from the ground up, championships and all, logos, all kinds of fun stuff, all included in Wrestler Unstoppable, available now, as I said, to all Facebook users, totally free. If you want to become a member of the Pro Wrestling Podcast family, you want your name in the shout-outs like my good buddy John down there in Texas. John, always love to hear from you. Check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Pro Wrestling Podcast. Sign up today. Our loyalty rewards program is in effect. $15 a month contributor, you can co-host an episode with myself. $7.50 a month contributors, you can be entered into a drawing to also co-host an episode of a live show with myself. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast. If you've got questions, comments, something you'd like me to talk about in a future episode, give me a shout over at the Pro Wrestling Sound Off line, 267-642-1160. Leave anything you want me to get to there, and I will get to that as soon as possible. Jumping into the news for the day, we've got a little bit of everything. We've got some WWE news. We've got Impact news. We've got AEW news. Well, sort of, maybe, hypothetically, theoretically, and a whole mishmash of other things. Let's start with Impact Wrestling. We don't do that very often. Impact Wrestling doesn't always make the biggest waves, though I would argue they make great wrestling matches, great storylines. They really do. Some's a little hokey, but there's some really good stuff going on over there. The big confirmation coming out of their big pay-per-view this past weekend is that TNA Wrestling, the branding of Impact Wrestling, is changing back to its origination of TNA Wrestling starting in 2024. I think that's a good idea. There's a lot of brand name recognition, and there was articles that talked about the fan response when you go to one of the Impact Wrestling shows, fans still chanting TNA, TNA. So if the fans are pushing for it, why not go there? Included in the announcement about the name change is also that some of the talents that appeared at Bound for Glory this past weekend are potentially coming back to the company. And by coming back to the company, let's talk first about PCO, who has been on a tear in the indies for the last several years. Ring of Honor, some Impact Wrestling, and then a lot of indie stuff. Pierre-Carl Ouellette, who, for those people who want to go back in WWE lore and look at the Quebecers tag team, former WWE tag team champions, that's who we're talking about. Doing a tag team partner of the Mountie for years, had great feuds with the Steiner brothers. Well, he's been just a revolutionary star for the last few years in his presentation, this almost cyborg Frankenstein-esque character that is just an absolute beast. At Bound for Glory, he wins a Monsters Ball match, which was a brutal affair. It was a great match. If you didn't get to see it, find it online, look it up somewhere, watch it. But PCO had been on his way out of Impact Wrestling until very recently. And now, after winning the four-person Monsters Ball match this past Saturday at Bound for Glory, the word is that he has now signed a new contract to stay a part of TNA Wrestling. There's no terms released as to what the actual length or anything related to that with the contract is, but I'm glad to see him find a place he can call home, because for a long time it looked like maybe he would leave. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to AEW, where the roster is bloated, and he's a special kind of talent. I don't know that he would fit with the AEW audience. WWE is not going to give him an opportunity because of his age. So perhaps Impact Wrestling really is his best option. Probably could have done something in Ring of Honor with Tony Khan. Probably could go down to Mexico if he wanted, or maybe even Japan. But I think the Impact/TNA Wrestling is probably the best option for him. And I'm glad to see him happy with a new contract. Somebody who is not yet under new contract would be Drew McIntyre, who is still waiting to sign a contract. And the word is, I guess there's speculation out there that this isn't really about Drew McIntyre looking to leave the company. As a matter of fact, on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez were discussing this specifically. And one of the things they said on the show was that while McIntyre's not looking to leave WWE, he is trying to get the best possible offer, which is why he hasn't signed a new deal yet. Now, we know that he's lined up for a championship opportunity at Crown Jewel. But if it were me, I think it's a great time to give him that championship. The only way I wouldn't give him that championship at Crown Jewel would be if you're going to have a Damian Priest cash in. You could have Drew McIntyre soften up, Seth Rollins have Damian Priest cash in at the end of the show. The problem I have with that is Priest is still one half of the tag team champions, and I think that makes it a little funky. But I really think you got to get the championship off of Seth sometime soon. I don't like all the dabbling with Seth Rollins and the Judgment Day and all this back and forth about whether he's in with Judgment Day, whether Drew McIntyre's with Judgment Day. But whatever it is, Drew McIntyre is clearly in a headlining program right now, despite the fact that his contract is coming up in 2024, like it seems like just about everybody under the sun's contracts are coming up. Hopefully WWE gets that squared away. It sounds like they are at least on the same page in terms of what their goals are, getting him back to the company, but just not putting pen to paper quite yet. Former WWE superstar Hall of Famer, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase was in the news. I hate to chuckle, but there are viral meme pictures of Virgil where he goes to these like signing events at like WrestleCons and other cons and just has just nobody show up. Big long space of there's nobody in line to meet and greet the guy. But when you see him on his social media, I have him on Instagram and a few other places, he's always talking like he is the center of the wrestling universe. And I know he does that to rile people up and get people to pay attention to what he's saying. But Ted DiBiase was on the Everybody's Got a Pod podcast, and he was asked about Virgil and whether or not he belongs in the Hall of Fame. And anybody who listens to my show knows I have some very strong opinions about the WWE Hall of Fame. Ted DiBiase's reaction was no. Adamantly no. He said Virgil was a valet, period. He never wrestled. The only wrestling match he may have had was with me, and that was short-lived because honestly, he's a nice enough guy. He's just not that wrestling savvy. There's just no other way to put it. It's impressive to me that a guy is so well-known who didn't really have an extensive career, or so one would think. What I think DiBiase is overlooking is a couple things. First off, Virgil held the $1 Million Championship for an extended period of time. He did compete with DiBiase at SummerSlam where he won that championship, and he went on to carry that championship for several months. There was one point where Repo Man repossessed the championship belt and things like that. So Virgil wasn't a one-off wrestling match type of thing. In addition, if we're being honest, in the CWA back in the 80s, Virgil was known as Soul Train Jones. He was the AWA International Heavyweight Champion at one point, and then he went to WWE, and he was like a jobber there, and he had hundreds of matches before wrestling Ted DiBiase and being his valet. There's some people quote that he has over 800 matches in the 38 years that he's been in the business through the CWA, WWE, WCW, the independent scene. He even had a match in 2020. You know, I don't know that his resume is Hall of Fame worthy. And those, like I said, those who listen to the show, they know I get very critical of WWE Hall of Fame. There are certain people who are in there I don't think should be. There are other people who are not in there who I feel absolutely should be. And when it comes to somebody like Virgil, I think if you had inducted him with the $1 Million Man almost as a tandem, though they weren't a tandem in the ring, just as like it's almost like the NWO thing, right? You have Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and then you threw in X-Pac too. X-Pac was there for some of it, but he wasn't really a huge part of it. It's like inducting Scott Flash Norton and Buff Bagwell and Lex Luger and Conan, and they were all in the NWO too, but they didn't go in together when the NWO went in. I feel like, maybe X-Pac didn't necessarily need to go with them. He should be in there by himself, maybe as a member if you're going to add other people, maybe with DX if you know what I mean? Like there's ways to get him in there. When it comes to Virgil, that would have been the way to get him into the Hall of Fame. I don't think he did enough wrestling of any serious quality to get in the Hall of Fame on his own merits. But then again, you got people like Hillbilly Jim and Coco Beware in there. People who listen to the show know that I used to have a video clip up. It's actually on my Pro Wrestling Podcast channel on YouTube, where a good friend of mine, Mike in Lansdale, just got me one of those cameos from Coco Beware him thanking me for my support of him going into the Hall of Fame, which was such a tongue-in-cheek joke, because anybody who listens to the show knows I have such a problem with Coco Beware and Hillbilly Jim and people like that being in the Hall of Fame. But Virgil, I agree with DiBiase, does not belong in there, but unless he would have gone in when Ted DiBiase went in himself. Now, two other things to talk about tonight. One of them I'm very excited about. One of them, not so much, not really. As a matter of fact, let's jump to that one. I was going to end with that one. I'm going to jump to that now. That's CM Punk. The word out there, after the AEW issue, CM Punk's gone, wants to go back to WWE. Then reports came out that there was conversations, discussions. WWE disputes that. Then word came out that WWE had denied him, that he wanted to go, but WWE wasn't interested. This week, there was a new report that came out that said they still are interested. That's part of why potentially they're rearranging their seating layout for Survivor Series. For those who haven't heard, they've found a way to add a couple thousand more seats, change the way the arena will be set up, more like a Madison Square Garden approach to the pay-per-view. And with all that going on, WWE, their tickets are just flying in Chicago. Granted, there's been no reason to believe Punk will be there. And actually, coming out this week, and just for the record, AEW is also returning to Chicago, and they are struggling to sell tickets there when they used to sell tickets there pretty easily, partially because Punk is gone. But there was word about whether or not Punk will go back to AEW, but neither one of those may be the place he ends up. His buddy Ace Steel over the weekend at Bound for Glory, here we go back to TNA/Impact Wrestling, took on the role as a producer in Impact Wrestling. And word was, could Punk end up in Impact Wrestling? Well, it turns out he was at a Blackhawks game during the Bound for Glory pay-per-view, but they did do television tapings for Access Television, and Punk was backstage meeting with anybody who was willing to talk to him. Somebody indicated he spoke to Scott D'Amore. He also spoke to Will Osprey, a whole bunch of different people, and seemed to be very well liked back in the backstage area and was welcomed by the talent, which makes you wonder. Now, here's the complication. I heard Busted Open Radio today, or maybe it was another one. I can't remember off the top of my head because I read and watch so much of this stuff. That the salary that he made in AEW is like 15 to 20, maybe even 30 times what the highest paid person in Impact Wrestling gets. I get it, but it's not like AEW's beating the door down to get him back. WWE has said no. He may never, if he doesn't take Impact, he may never wrestle anywhere ever again. And maybe he doesn't need to financially, but maybe he wants to just tell a story, do something of substance for somebody, help another company get over. I did see Billy Corgan said if he wanted to have some fun, he should come to the NWA. I'd be open to that too. But the reality is Punk was backstage for the tapings and spoke to anyone who would give him some time, and it was said to be very positive. There was actually talk of Ace Steel performing at Bound for Glory in the Gauntlet for the Gold match, but they didn't do that because they figured if people saw Ace Steel, they would automatically think CM Punk, and they didn't want to have a letdown when Punk didn't show up. But could he be going there in the future? Not quite sure. We'll have to wait and see. Final topic of the evening. WWE very, very interested in New Japan Pro Wrestling and part-time AEW Impact Wrestling superstar Will Osprey. Mentioned him a few seconds ago. Was at Bound for Glory. Had another, this must be the 4th, 5th, 6th week in a row that he's had a 5-star quality type of match somewhere in the world. Pro Wrestling Noah, AEW, New Japan, Impact Wrestling. Like, the guy just kills it wherever he goes. And apparently WWE is gearing up to make an offer for him. Dave Meltzer reported on Wrestling Observer Radio that WWE is highly interested in signing Osprey, who's trying to secure the best offer possible for him and his family, which is interesting because not only is this coming up and WWE has interest, but Will Osprey also, just was announced earlier today, hired a huge agent because he has his impending free agency in February 2024. For anybody who knows anything about agents in professional wrestling, I'm not talking about the guys who put the matches together. I'm talking about talent agents. Barry Bloom has been representing people for decades. Some of his biggest clients, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Jesse the Body Ventura. He also represents Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and Chris Jericho. The conversation is around Will Osprey hiring him because he's looking to get a maximum deal no matter where it is. And could that be WWE? Well, the thought in the past has always been that there's no chance that he was not interested in moving to America full time, and that would rule him out of WWE unless they wanted to pay a whole lot of money for him to be the face of that new WWE European expansion, which hasn't come to fruition yet. And perhaps that's a thing. It looks like he is much more open to coming to the United States now. He's spent some time here. He's here all the time wrestling one-offs, but apparently last summer he spent some time with Kyle Fletcher and Sky Blue, getting an idea what it was like to live in the United States. And he actually had a conversation with Metro where he said, in reference to potentially coming to WWE or coming to North America, he said, I mean, we've spoke about it. I'm now open to the idea of stretching myself out a little bit more. As age has become more apparent to me, my body is hurting more and more. I'm open to all avenues, which sounds like he's looking to maximize this contract and really financially set himself up well. When talking, he said he talked about the conversation about coming to America with his girlfriend. They joked about, the only thing that would hold the couple back is the amount of money they spent on their new kitchen. But this is a guy who is a former IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. He's been in Rev Pro, held championships all over the world. He's a current IWGP United States, Great British Champion, whatever you want to call it right now. And he is a phenom. And it doesn't matter what period of his career you look back at and see what he's done in the ring. It is all absolutely fantastic, and I don't care who signs him, it's a huge steal for whoever that is. I actually have a little bit of feeling in my heart that I really hope he does come to WWE, just because there's matches that he has trash talked on Twitter and X or whatever you want to call it, and gotten some banter back and forth with talent over the last couple years that I think would be much more interesting to the fans. Seth Rollins, people like that, who he's waiting that matches with. He already has a history with Ricochet. They could relive that memories and put some more shows on in WWE. Him and Logan Paul I'd even be interested in seeing. Rey Mysterio, some of these guys. I would love to see some of those matches. And eventually, yes, I would have no problem seeing him go against Roman Reigns. On the flip side, what's left to do in AEW? And I'm not saying that like he's been an AEW contracted guy all this time. He's New Japan, but he's wrestled Chris Jericho. He's wrestled Kenny Omega. He's wrestled, pretty much all their upper echelon guys, John Moxley. So who's left? So I think WWE does offer him the most opportunity, at least at unique new matches and opponents, and I think that's going to be appealing for him when his free agency occurs. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us next episode. We'll run down the latest wrestling news and rumors. Special thanks, as always, goes out to bensound.com and proplanet.com for producing any music and sound we use in our show. Today's show sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bring a new friend to family game night. It's very easy by bringing a copy of Sketchy People. Showcase your artistic side in this game from Beazle Games by going to thegamecrafter.com and picking up your copy today. Make sure you put thegamecrafter.com to pick up your copy. If you're looking for your next career move, you're considering college, university life, or you just need some formal training for your next career decision, go to our sister website at frolifeplanning.com for all your higher education needs, as Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Dr. Fro. I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us tonight. Until next time, take care, everybody. Have a great night.